Hello dear students, in this video we will be talking about the challenges of nation building in India, and this video is basically prepared for the students of higher secondary. So it will be useful for them as in coursework. So I have taken this book of the course related book. So let us see first of all what is there in this particular chapter. So in this chapter we will be talking about partition and the freedom which came with this partition, and also the various issues related with the integration of princely state into the Indian Union, and also about the State Reorganization Act and the way the modern states were created in the independent India. So let us look into the chapter. So it is termed as challenges to nation building. So as we all know, India got its independence from the British colonial rule on 15th August 1947. It is midnight, so we can say in the midnight of 15 August 1947. So it was a long awaited moment for all the Indians. After a long struggle of almost 200 years, right from the beginning of the colonial rule in 1757 after the Battle of Palase, when India came under the British dominion, we have been waiting for this particular moment, and there was a struggle when thousands of people lost their life. So it was not an easy thing for India, and this particular independence had come with a price, as I was already told you that we had lost a lot of people. And also it was India got independence in a very difficult moment, as we all know, just after the Second World War, when the British empire was weakened by the war. They thought it better to give India independence along with many other colonies worldwide. So India was in a very peculiar situation. We all know India is a large country, lot of diversity of linguistic, religious, caste and whatnot. So it was full of challenges for the leaders of the country to maintain this independence. So it was a difficult situation, and also it was accompanied by the loss of the partition of country into two parts, India and Pakistan. So there was a lot of displacement, refugee issues which we will tackle in this particular chapter. So let us see. First of all, we have this image here of Prime Minister Jawaharlal Nehru, who is speaking from the Red Fort on 15th of August 1947, which is our Independence Day. So we can see here that how it all began with, and if you can see the screen, there is a news of that particular day, 15 August 1947, published in Hindustan Time, which says the end of 200-year-old British rule in India. And these all things we remember that how after a long struggle India got independence. If we begin with the saying of Gandhi, Mahatma Gandhi, tomorrow we shall be free from the slavery of the British dominion, but at midnight India will be partitioned. Tomorrow will be thus a day of rejoicing as well as mourning. We all know, we have seen in a lot of movies, especially in our generation, because we have not lived through the partition which our grandparents have lived through. So we have come to know more about them from the literature, from books, from stories, poems, and especially modern times movies. There are a lot of movies. We will be discussing a few about them also. So let us begin with the three challenges which was accompanied with the partition and independence of India. So first challenge, as we can see here, the first and the immediate challenge was to save the nation that was united yet accommodative of the diversity in our society. I already told you that India is a large and diverse country. There is a diversity in every aspect of life. If you look throughout the country from Kashmir to Kanyakumari, thousands of languages, caste, culture, traditions, dressing system, people's behavior, everything is different, right? From Nagaland to Gujarat, there is thousands and thousands of differences amongst the people. So in this kind of difference, it is very difficult to maintain a unity, and this was a serious question because there was the partition of the country into India and Pakistan on the basis of religion. So it is very difficult for the leaders to think that the country would be united for a long time, and not just our leaders. Many of the foreign writers and observers commented that it would be a very dangerous decade for India, in the words of Alexander Selling. So we have seen that people had doubts that the unity of India would be maintained for a long time. This integration would be permanent. And the second challenge was to establish democracy. We all know, we all lived through a period of slavery. It was a period of colonial rule. People did not know what democracy is. They could not practice democracy. So to impose democracy in this kind of population was a challenging task. So this was another challenge for India. And the third challenge was to ensure the development and well-being of the entire society, and not only of some section of people as it was done in the colonial time, only the rich people benefited, but after independence all section of people, all kinds of, all religions, all caste people will have to benefit from the development and progress of the nation. So the constitution was already prepared, and the constitution through its two chapters, basically the fundamental rights and directive principle of state policy, directed and guided the state to provide all the basic amenities to the people along with their human rights. So these were major challenges to the young and independent India. So in this book we'll try to highlight some of the issues. So in this chapter, basically we will be focusing on the first challenge of nation building that occupied the central stage in the just years immediately after the independence. So we will see how India became independent and how it integrated the hundreds of princely states throughout the country. So if we all begin, let us begin with the major challenge of India, and that was the partition of India, the country, into two parts, India and Pakistan. And we will have to see during those times what were the people thinking about it, people on the both sides of the horizon, on the both sides of the boundaries, because partition was done very haphazardly. The Muslim League demanded partition as a trick to gain power from the British Empire, but then it was slowly realized that partition was inevitable. There was a lot of violence throughout the country between the two religious people. And we see that people were not happy with this partition. Basically the people from the nationalist movement, the Congress leaders and members, and also a large number of poets, writers, and people related with the cinema. So one of the example we take here is that of the famous 20th century poet, Urdu poet, basically Faiz Ahmad Faiz. You might have heard his name. If you haven't, we'll just talk about him. So he writes about the agony of the partition in his poem called Subh-e-Azadi. So I'll just try to recite, I'll just try to play a video of this recitation of this poem. I hope it will be audible. So let me just play the video, and it is narrated by our own very well-known actor Nasiruddin Shah. It is just for about 3 minutes. So let us play it, and we will feel the agony of the partition in this video.
ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये शब कसीदा सहर, ये दाग दाग उजाला, ये शब कसीदा सहर, वो इंतजार था जिसका, ये वो सहर तो नहीं, ये वो सहर तो नहीं जिसकी आरज़ू लेके चले थे यार, कि मिल जाएगी कहीं न कहीं फलक के दश्त पे तारों की आखिरी मंजिल, कहीं तो होगा शबे सुस्त मौज का साहिल, कहीं तो जाके रुकेगा सफीना ए गमे दिल। जवां लहू की पुरस्कार शाहराहों से चले जो यार, तो दामन पे कितने हाथ पड़े, दयारे हुस्न की बेसब्र ख्वाबगाहों से पुकारती रही बाहें, बदन बुलाते रहे, बहुत अजीज थी लेकिन रुखे सहर की लगन, बहुत करीं था हसीना ने नूर का दामन, सुबक सुबक थी तमन्ना, दबी दबी थी थकन। सुना है हो भी चुका है फिराक जुल्मतो नूर, सुना है हो भी चुका है विसाल मंजिलो गाम, बदल चुका है बहुत अहले दर्द का दस्तूर, निशात वस्ल हलाल व अजाब हिज्र हराम। जिगर की आग, नजर की उमंग, दिल की जलन, किसी पे चारा हिजरा का कुछ असर ही नहीं। कहां से आई बादे सबा किधर को गई, अभी तक चिराग सरे रह को कुछ खबर ही नहीं। अभी गिरानी ए शब में कमी नहीं आई, निजात दीदा दिल की घड़ी नहीं आई, चले चलो कि वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई, चले चलो कि वो मंजिल अभी नहीं आई।
So we see how the agony is described by Faiz Ahmad Faiz in his very strongly worded poem Subh-e-Azadi. The last words are very meaningful. Chale chalo ki azadi abhi nahi aayi. Because many people might have thought that granting of Pakistan or Hindustan was their ultimate goal. But the thing that happened, but the incident, the events that took place, the killings and the writings and the displacement of millions of people made them realize that this is not the independence we seeked for. So these were the strong words put by Faiz Ahmad Faiz, who was a well-known leftist, and later on he moved to Pakistan, of course, but then he was imprisoned there too. So in the words of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, we all remember him. In India, basically he is seen as a villain, a person who wanted to make Pakistan independent country separate from India. But then his speech of 11 August 1947 gives us a very different picture of Muhammad Ali Jinnah, who then realized that even though we'll have Pakistan or Hindustan, people will have to have their rights. All the minorities, the Hindus of the Pakistan, Hindus and Sikhs, and the Muslims in India should be given the right as independent citizens. So he says, we should begin to work in that spirit, that in course of time, all these angularities of the majority and minority communities, the Hindu and the Muslim community, because even as regards Muslim, you have Pathans, Punjabis, Shias, Sunnis, and so on. And among the Hindus, you have Brahmins, Vaishnavas, Khatris, also Bengalis, Madrasis, and so on, will vanish. You are free. You are free to go to your temples. You are free to go to your mosque or to any place of your worship in this state of Pakistan. You may belong to any religion or caste or creed. That has nothing to do the business of the state. So this was it showcases the secular side of Muhammad Ali Jinnah. However, let me remind that this particular speech of 11 August 1947 is banned in Pakistan, because this gives us a very different picture of what kind of Pakistan was imagined by Muhammad Ali Jinnah, a very secular Pakistan though. So let us move on and see what was happening just after another poem. Of course, we have here. I will not show any recitation on this, but I would like to take name of this particular poet, very well-known Punjabi poet, Amrita Pritam. And if you go to YouTube, you will find many poems by her, and there are movies also based on novels and stories written by her. So I would all request you all to go to YouTube and see more from Amrita Pritam. So let us talk about the partition now. As we all know, it was the 20th century most unfortunate event. Most of the commentators, writers throughout the world will agree that this was the largest displacement of people in the last century. So the process of partition wasn't easy. As I was telling you, that it has been on demand right from the early 1940s. And the British too at times did not want to give Pakistan so easily, but then pressed on by Muslim League and a number of events, bloody events and writings, the British Empire realized that, and also Indian Congress leaders too realized that partition was inevitable. So the idea, it might appear not so difficult that just drawing line is enough on the map, but it is not that easy, because if you see here, first of all, there was no single belt of Muslim majority areas in India. We all know in India we live in a mixed kind of localities, Hindus and Muslims together. There is no place where no one particular majority or locality where one particular majority is, especially Muslim majority, was in majority. Even though the present day Pakistan, there were a large number of Hindus and Sikhs, especially if you see the Sindh province of Pakistan. No, it was a Hindu majority province. At the same time, the present day Bangladesh, which was earlier East Pakistan, it had large number of Hindu minorities areas and also many other tribal minorities, basically in the Chittagong hill tract areas. So this was not easy just to demarcate the boundaries. So West and East Pakistan separated by long, and also remember that point of time when Bangladesh was East Pakistan, in between there was India. No, the West Pakistan and East Pakistan, there was a long stretch of gap. So it was very difficult to draw such kind of two countries which are geographically separated by thousands of miles. And also many people within Pakistan, especially Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, who was the leader of the Northwest Frontier Province, the area which is between Pakistan and Afghanistan. So people of those area, and basically this particular person who was known as Frontier Gandhi, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, he was particularly against the idea of Islamic State of Pakistan. So these people weren't very happy in joining with the Pakistan province. The third problem was that of the two Muslim majority provinces of British India, the Punjab and Bengal, had a large number of areas where non-Muslims were majority. As I was telling you, the present day there is also there is also Punjab in Pakistan. The large part of Punjab went to Pakistan, and also same thing happened in Bengal. The large part of Bengal went to Bangladesh, the present day Bangladesh, which was called East Pakistan, and earlier it was called East Bengal. You might remember at 1905, the Bengal was divided into two parts, East and West Bengal, and East Bengal and Assam was made into a province. So that way, East Bengal had a Muslim majority though, but there were a large number of non-Muslim minority in both these provinces. So it was very difficult to decide, so without avoiding a large displacement. And also, this was related to the fourth and the most intractable of all the problems of population. This was the problem of minorities on both sides. There will be lakhs and lakhs of Hindus and Muslims on both sides of the boundary. So what might happen to them? As we have seen, just years preceding the partition, there were large amount of violence. In Kolkata, in Punjab, in Lahore, in Sindh, everywhere we have seen that there was religious and communal violence throughout the country. So these people weren't very safe in this area. So what will happen to them was a big question. So now we see what happened after the partition. What is the consequence of the partition? The drawing of the red cliff line, which was so haphazardly done. So in the year 1947 was the year of one of the largest, most abrupt, unplanned, tragic transfer of population that the human history has known. Of course, you might have seen the last year what had happened just after Corona lockdown. Many of the people, lakhs and lakhs of people, tried walking back to their homes, thousands of miles. We have seen people from Gujarat walking to Assam, to Bengal, to Bihar, from various parts of southern India, from Mumbai and all other parts. So we have actually witnessed this history in the age of electronic and TV and all other things were available. But in those times, those benefits, those technology, that kind of administrative setup was not available. The country was poor and the people had a lot of other difficulties too. So it was a major catastrophic event. So you might have seen there are a lot of movies you should go through. You'll find it in any kind of channels and YouTube also. You will see what was the condition of the people. So cities like Lahore, Bombay, Calcutta, Amritsar, they all had divided into communal zones, Hindus areas and the Muslim areas. So if you see Sadat Hasan Manto, another very important and interesting writer of the 20th century, basically his short stories are very well reflects the idea of society, the condition of society in that times. And I would all request you all to go to YouTube and listen to the stories of Sadat Hasan Manto. So writers, he has written here in one of his story. I tell you, you should read the story. Toba Singh Tek or something, I don't remember the name exactly now, but he writes what is the condition of the people, what had happened to them, what was the madness of the partition. So he says here, rioters brought the running train to an halt. People belonging to the other community were pulled out and slaughtered with swords and bullets. If you see many of the movies, you will see there how the people were killed. The remaining passengers were treated to halwa, fruits, and milk. The other people of their own community were treated very well, but the people of other community were just brought out, pulled out, and killed like anything. The chief organizer said, "Brothers and sisters, news of this train arrival was delayed. That is why we have not been able to entertain you lavishly the way we wanted to." So this was the condition of people, the mentality of the people. It was all about killing. So this forced people to abandon their houses, their ancestral property, their farms, and everything they had, and just to try and escape to save their life. So many of the movies of that time, especially Garam Hawa, if you see, which was released in 1973, it tells about the real picture of the partition. Of course, there are many new movies too. You can go through them in YouTube. So all these people were, they came to India and they started living in the refugee camps in a very pathetic conditions. So the partition was not merely a division of properties, liabilities, and assets, or a political division of the country and administrative setup. But also there are many kind of, very interestingly, if you see the partition of when India-Pakistan partition took place, there were conflicts regarding sharing of many things, even chairs also, typewriters, chairs, how many typewriters will be sent to Pakistan, museums, how will they be divided, and so many minute things were had to be looked into. And also the employees of the government, railway employee, police employee, they had to be divided. So above all, it was a violent separation of communities who had lived for generations. For hundreds of years, these people were living together. And it was not just a separation of the land, it was a separation of the heart. So beyond the administrative concern and financial constraint, however, there was another problem. That was the leaders were thinking, they were afraid. Then yet partition on religious basis had taken place. Did that make India a Hindu nation automatically? So there was a doubt. If Pakistan is a Muslim nation, then India, or Hindustan as it was called by many, would it be a Hindu nation? So it was a big question, and many people wanted to make India a Hindu nation because Pakistan, the whole idea of India-Pakistan was based on the division of religion. So it was a big question and big challenge for the constitution makers. So there were competing political interests behind these conflicts. The Muslim League was formed to protect the interests of the Muslims in colonial India. It was in the forefront of the demand for separate Muslim nation, I was already telling you. So many people thought that India should be a Hindu nation. Of course, one person of that time did not think that on that terms, and he was Mahatma Gandhi. And what was Mahatma Gandhi doing on the day of the partition? This is very interesting. He was not celebrating the day of independence. He actually traveled to Bengal, which had shown the very violent riots in the partition time, especially the Noakhali district of the present day Bangladesh. So he was there praying and requesting people not to kill each other. So he walked thousands of miles to request people, and he called what is called as the all religious meetings and tried to pacify people. So Gandhi's action were, however, not liked by all. Extremists in both the communities blamed him for their condition. Many Hindu nationalists in India thought that it is because of the Gandhi that partition happened, and many Muslims also thought that Gandhi was doing injustice to us. So both people were not very happy with him, and that's why we see later on he was assassinated by an Hindu extremist. So Gandhi's death had an almost magical effect on the communal situation. But there was one thing which happened after Gandhi's death. It was that people became pacified. They realized that the extremism is not good for the society. So people like organization like RSS was banned immediately, which was propagating communal violence at that time. So you can see the newspaper of the 4th February 1948, just after the death of Gandhi. Some of the news clippings and shots are given here. So we will not discuss all of them. Of course, here is a story. You can go through them in your books also. And now another important point of this particular chapter was the integration of princely state. As we all know, India at that point of time was basically two kind of countries were here. One was the British administered India, which was directly under the administration of the British colonial administrative setup, and another India was the princely state, which were more than 500 odd numbers. There are large number of princely state, some of them big states like Hyderabad, Bhopal, Travancore, Jammu Kashmir, and very small states were also there like Ajmer or Bikaner, Jampur, and all those. So it was a big challenge for that particular leaders of that time to integrate all these diverse and princely leaders to make them come together and unite with India. And the process began just after the cabinet mission came to India, and the whole process of constitution had begun in the year 1946 itself. But there were some states which were creating problem, and this problem we had come with some of the big states. Basically, the first we can take the example of the ruler of Travancore. Travancore is the present day parts of few parts of Tamil Nadu, and basically the almost the present day Kerala state. So Travancore had a king, and the king of Travancore declared that himself to be an independent nation just immediately after the British left India. And also the Nizam of Hyderabad was also there. So if you can see this picture, you will get some idea of how India looked like before partition. The parts in the blue are the princely states, and the yellow parts are the British administered, or the British India we can say. So this is all India and Pakistan together, we can see all the parts. So there are big states like Jammu Kashmir, Balochistan, Ajmer, and some parts of Madhya Pradesh. These are all princely states. Rajputana and central India too. There were some states. Hyderabad was the big state and the most richest Nizam of that particular point of time. There was Mysore, there was this Travancore states. So more than 500 states, so to say, were existing in India at that particular point of time. So all of them had to be united with either with Pakistan. Those who laid within the geographical limits of Pakistan had to unite with Pakistan or integrate with Pakistan, and those within India had to integrate with India. But few of the states did not do so, and we'll talk about them. So basically there are three major states, the Nizam of Hyderabad, Travancore, and also the Bhopal, the Nawab of Bhopal was there. So these states were trying to form an independent state, independent country of their own. So the government approach. So how did the government reply to them? So the interim government of that point of time, which was formed, the Constituent Assembly was also the interim government. So it took a very stern position. It took a very strict position. So it said that all of this princely state had to come to accede to India. And during that time, the Home Minister was the very well-known the Iron Man of India, Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. So he played a historical role in negotiating with the rulers of princely state, firmly but diplomatically, and bringing most of them to the Indian Union. For instance, there were 26 small states in India's Odisha. You can see Odisha itself is a small state, but within Odisha, there were 26 small princely states. And within Gujarat, there were, in the Saurashtra region of Gujarat, there were 14 big states, 119 small states, and numerous other different administrations. So this was a very peculiar condition with so many states in India. So the government is, if you see the government approach, it was guided by three important considerations. They were taking into consideration. Firstly, most of the people of the princely state clearly wanted to become part of Indian Union. The people were not happy with the princes, with the rulers. They wanted to become free like the people in other parts of Indian Union. Secondly, the government was prepared to be flexible in giving autonomy to some region. Also, Indian government said that okay, if you come to us, we will give you some benefits, some autonomy in terms of some kind of conditions, in terms of your internal politics or something like that. And thirdly, in the backdrop of partition, which has brought into focus the contest over demarcation of territory, the integration and consolidation of the territorial boundaries of the nation had assumed supreme importance because partition had taken place. So leaders in India were afraid that most of these smaller states may want more autonomy, more power, and try to become separate nation, which they could not afford to give them so. So before 15 August 1947, many peaceful negotiations took place. Most of the majority of the states, bigger or smaller, joined India by 15 August 1947, and they had to sign a treaty, an agreement called Instrument of Accession. Only a few states remained which did not sign it. Basically, the states of princely state of Junagadh, Hyderabad, Kashmir, and Manipur proved to be difficult than the rest of others. Of course, we'll talk about Kashmir in details in another chapter. And also other states, Junagadh, it was not very difficult because the ruler of Junagadh, when the police approached and the people protested, because Junagadh was a Hindu dominated state while the ruler was a Muslim, so he escaped to Pakistan and it became a part of India. And also if you talk about basically Hyderabad and Manipur, we'll start with Hyderabad though. If you can see this picture here, we will see the Nizam of Hyderabad with Sardar Vallabhbhai Patel. And that point of time, the Nizam of Hyderabad, it is said that he was the richest person, richest king of the world at that point of time. So Hyderabad was the largest princely state of India and it was entirely surrounded by Indian territory. But the Nizam of Hyderabad, he thought he wanted to be an independent nation. So he tried to delay the whole process of accession. So in the meantime, the people of Hyderabad, the particular day, of course, the present day Hyderabad is a smaller part of the larger Hyderabad. So the present day parts of Telangana, Maharashtra and Madhya Pradesh too was a part of the earlier Hyderabad kingdom. So the people of Hyderabad protested against the Nizam. They said that we want to join India like other parts of India. But the Nizam was not that easily convinced. He led a violence kind of torture to dominate the people, and repression was unleashed through the local militia called the Rajakars. The Rajakar was like a local militia. No, they were working under the Nizam. So they killed a lot of people and tortured people. But the communist movement was very strong in the Telangana region or the present day, Telangana, the Hyderabad of that point of time. So they all protested against it, and the Indian government ultimately had to move Indian army to liberate, as they called it, the kingdom of Hyderabad, and it was access to India. Likewise, if we talk about Manipur, so even a few days before independence, the Maharaja of Manipur, Bodhachandra Singham, signed the instrument of accession with the Indian government on the assurance that the internal autonomy of Manipur would be maintained. So he was given some assurance, some kind of conditions that okay, we will not interfere into the internal politics of Manipur. So he had joined India, but there was voices within Manipur who wanted to remain independent. Many of the people protested against the king. So on June 1948, it became a constitutional monarchy after holding of elections. Thus, Manipur was the first part of India to hold an election based on universal adult franchise. So within the assembly of Manipur, within the legislative assembly of Manipur, there were sharp differences over the question of merger of Manipur with India. I was telling you that few parties, the Congress wanted to merge with India and the other parties were protesting against it. The government of India anyway succeeded in pressurizing the Maharajas to signing the merger agreement in September 1949, which made Manipur a part of India. But many people resented against it because the legislative assembly, the elected legislative assembly of Manipur, was not taken into confidence or was not even consulted. So we can see even today many people, many groups of Manipur, they're fighting against the Indian Union. So if you see this cartoon here, this cartoon comments on the relation between the people and the rulers in the princely state. You can see the people are never consulted, no? It is the ruler which actually talked with the government of India. So this was the problem in some of the states, but anyway, it was overcome by the government of India. Another problem during the time was that of reorganization of state. As we all know, you have just seen the map of India in 1947. It was a congregation of so many kinds of different parts and provinces and states with diverse kind of people living there. There was no any particular kind of division like present day. So in the British period, the most of the provinces were divided due to administrative efficiency. There was no like, okay, this is for Bengali people, this is Assamese people because more of them are Assamese or Boros, nothing like that. Just on administrative convenience. So it was a challenge for the Indian government to how to actually redesign India. So during the colonial rule, I was telling you, it was just the administrative convenience. But our national movement had rejected this division as artificial. They were not happy. The Indian National Congress and other Indian leaders were not happy with the administrative division of the Indian provinces. And as we see in the Nagpur session of Congress 1920, the Congress had actually decided on to linguistic divisions of the India. They were not confident about it, but they said that the state parties, if you see for example in our own state, the Assam Pradesh Congress Committee, likewise in other states too, the Pradesh Congress committees were made on the basis of language. So many provincial congress were created by linguistic zones and they did not follow the administrative division of the British India. But then things were to change after partition. Now what will be the basis? Our leaders felt that if we give state on the basis of language, there will be thousands of states in India and some of them may demand more autonomy. Ultimately, they will demand independence too. And they did not want to give another partition a chance. So this decision of national leadership, they said that, okay, no, we will not have language. state based on language. But then something happened in the southern state of, that time of course there was no Andhra Pradesh, it was a Madras presidency. But something, a kind of movement developed which actually forced the Indian government to divide state on the basis of language. And this began from the Telugu speaking areas of the old Madras province, which included the present day Tamil Nadu, parts of Andhra Pradesh, Kerala and the Karnataka. The Vishala Andhra movement, it is known as. Now, all the Telugu speaking people living in different parts of that particular region. Of course, that time it was no Tamil Nadu, there was the Madras presidency, Travancore state, and that some parts of Odisha also. They all demanded that we should have one state for the Telugu speaking population, and it was called as Vishala Andhra movement. So this movement gained momentum, and one very senior Congress leader of that particular region, Potti Srimalu, and he was a veteran Gandhian. He went on a indefinite fast, without eating, without drinking. He went on to a fast, and he died actually after 56 days. This caused a great unrest throughout the region. There were fights in the streets, government property were vandalized, destroyed, and finally the Prime Minister of India announced the formation of the state of Andhra Pradesh, which was based first state based on language, first linguistic state of India in December 1952. So in that way, other states, other people too demanded state based on their language. So if you can see the map of India after the State Reorganization Act had given its, the commission had given in 1955, there was a commission, the Indian government set up a commission to study the feasibility that can we have more state based on language, or what should be the basis of the new states reorganization. And the committee recommended that some of the states can be formed on the basis of language. And after that, there are some new states were formed. You can see this was the map of India after the commission had given its report, and new states were formed. Rajasthan, Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, Assam, and of course that time Assam was not divided; it was united Assam. So Mysore state, of course, there was no Karnataka then, and there was Maharashtra and Gujarat were formed in 1960, and later on Punjab and Haryana were divided. So we can see that a map of India had changed drastically after the State Reorganization Act. So this is what you can see in one of the cartoon where the people are demanding state for their for their community. Mahagujarat, Samyukta Karnataka, Brihan Maharashtra, Vishal Andhra, and this is Jawaharlal Nehru. He is unable to do anything to stop these people, and he can be seen as a helpless person there. So ultimately, the State Reorganization Act was passed in 1956, and this led to the formation of 14 new states and 6 union territories in India. Sorry. And later on there were many other states too, and this is something which did not stop. If you can see this cartoon here, you might have heard about a genie. There's kind of an old bottle and or kettle. He comes out suddenly and he asks the person, what do you want? And you can ask him anything. So this is something happened in India, that the cartoonist impression is, which says that the genie of linguistic state which came out did not agree to go inside the bottle now, and he went on making new states and new state. And until recently, you can see the melodrama, the first state of India, which was based on the basis of language, the linguistic state which paved the way for other states in India, Andhra Pradesh, actually was again redivided into two parts, Telangana and the Andhra state. So we can see actually that the whole idea of division based on language in the long run has failed. But even though there are many demands of new states in India, the Gorkhaland, the Bodoland, Saurashtra, Vidarbha, Bundelkhand, there are hundreds of demands actually throughout the country. So one of the most important concerns in the early year was the demand of a separate state would endanger the unity of the country. People initially thought that if we can give on going new states will be formed, and this will endanger the unity of the country. But of course, slowly it was realized that it is not so. If you can give new states or new union territories, it is good for the administration of the country to some extent. So now we have almost 28 states, because recently Jammu and Kashmir was taken away of its status of state. So we again come back to 28 states. It is more than 50 years, and we have seen many states have come up based on language. So above all, we can say that Linguistic state underline the acceptance of principle of diversity. When we say that India adopted democracy, it does not simply mean India embraced a democratic constitution, nor does it merely mean that India adopted the format of election. No, the choice was larger than that. It was a choice of recognizing and accepting the difference of the people. So India actually adopted and recognized the difference of the people, and it tried to adopt all those kind of diversities. So as you can see, a lot of states were created. Of course, Assam, if we need to know about it. No, in Assam also there was demand for separate state. In 1960, Nagaland was created. No, the Nagaland State Organization Act was passed. Then, of course, in 1972, Meghalaya was created. Later on, Manipur and Tripura were given the status of separate state, and much later in 87, Arunachal Pradesh and Mizoram were granted statehood. And so this way we have, and also recently Chhattisgarh, Uttarakhand and Jharkhand were given statehood in 2000, and of course the most recent is 2014, the state of Telangana. So in this way the India had come up many challenges, basically the challenge of partition and the challenge of statehood in the newly formed country. So in the next chapter we'll be talking more about the various political factions of the country. As of now, thank you.